All right, welcome back to the Windows Server saga. So we're going to be talking about Windows 2019. So the next step, we installed the server in the last video. The next step is we got to get it ready for the next phase so we can provide different services or functions. So some of the things we need to have, we need to come up with an IP address. So what IP address block we're going to use. So again, if we're going to provide services, it's better off to be static. So we're going to need to hard code this. So we're going to need to know our IP address, our mask, our default gateway, our AKA router. We need to know our DNS address. So we need to know these, four things. Next thing we need, to come up with a name. What are we calling this machine? So we have to come up with a computer name. And then if we're going to say like create our environment or domain, so we need a domain name. Domain name. And we need to come up with these things first before we go and start our services. So again, talking about computer names, I mean, when you're talking about deploying this in a large environment, it makes sense to have some type of naming convention. So, as an example, we can say, we can call it like if we were planning to, because I mean, so typically we are going to have some type of maybe asset tag. So we're going to have some type of tag that usually comes, for inventory. So we're going to have some type of inventory tag. We may have to deal with location. I guess the rejection palm is not working very good for left-handed people. And so we're going to have tags, location, maybe owner, service. So these are things we may have to take consideration in coming up with this name. So we can just do something very simple like come up with, the name of the service or the function it's going to do. So we can say this will be, maybe DC1 because this will be the first machine. And then we could use the tag, or the inventory tag number, like 25, 26, 27, whatever, some type of number. So then we can know that this is what this primary function of this machine. And we could tag like a V for virtual. We can tag a B for bare metal. So this way if it's on your virtual machines or it's a physical machine, however. But these are things you need to take consideration on coming up with your computer name. You want to have some type of methodology so you can, look up the specs of the machine and stuff like that and know information about it. And then a domain, again, I'm just going to use an example. I'm going to use yourname.local. So in my case, it's going to be lou.local. You do have to have a dot between the two. So the first step, we have to, come up with these names. So I'm just gonna go with this number here for the computer name. I'm going to just come up with this for the domain name. So there we go. So now I just have to come up with an IP address. So normally in a large environment, you're not going to, put your server on the same subnet as your workstation. So you typically would have a different subnet for that. So that's a later discussion, but just wanted to point that out in my particular case. I'm just doing a small little demonstration. So I'm just going to put them all in the same environment and go from there. All right. So let's go ahead and get this rolling. So now the first thing I want to do is static, because if you don't static your addresses, it may not work correctly. As I had some students the other day who did not static it and left it dynamic, and it didn't work correctly. So we're going to go with the IP4. I'm going to turn off IP6, because this way I don't have to worry about configuring it. And then here, I'm going to put address in there once I have my numlock on. And then since this guy, I plan to run DNS and Active Directory in this, so I'm going to point to itself. And then what I'm just going to do, so I have internet access, I'm going to point it to my DNS server in the house. So there we go. So that's step one. Come up with an IP address scheme. Now I'm going in here and changing the computer name. So this way it's just not something randomly. I'm going to hit next. And I'm going to postpone doing that part right now. And then see if I can want to double check something here. All right, I guess in the so under advanced on the computer name, I'm going to go under here. This is where you would put the fully domain name. So I'm going to go with local. So this way it has a full computer name. And now it's going to restart. So again, now that it's restarting, again, you can do this in VirtualBox, VMware, VMware Player, whatever. It's all still the same. In some virtualization, you may have to go into your actions and, if depending on which VM, so like an example in VirtualBox, you may have to go to device to be able to get the keyboard to show up. All right, so now I have it logged in. Now I have basically gone through the first set of steps. We've gone in there, set up our computer name, our domain, and we've done our IP addresses. Perfect. So let's go ahead and see how we would set this up for Active Directory. So now we're going to go to add roles. Here, the wizard's going to ask us through following some different steps. Again, we can just say skip this by default. Are we going to install a role or feature? Are we going to set up a remote desktop? We're not going to set up a remote desktop, so we're not, because you have to have special licensing for this VDI. So the 90-day trial, I don't know if it's going to do that or not. Never tried it. But we're going to go with the role. Here it's showing us our first server that we can see. There we go. We're going to hit next. Here we're going to click on the second one down, which is Active Directory. We're going to click add. By default, we don't have DNS installed, so it's going to install DNS for us. So we'll just leave that blank. So we're going to hit next. And this is going to ask us if we want to be part of Azure. No, we just want to have a local domain. So this would be if we're going to restart a machine remotely. Since we're going to be right here, we don't need to. So we're going to go ahead and hit install. So this is going to go ahead and start the installation process. So once this is finished installing, we'll go up here to the flag, and then it's going to give us another task in there, or part two. This is just part one, installing. See, there we go. We can close that out. And here you can see we have to promote this guy. All right. So let's go through the three questions here. Again, if we are a whole new environment, I mean, we have nothing. So we're going to go with C. If we're adding another domain, so that'll be an example we'll do later. Or if we're adding a new domain, but an existing forest. So think of when you look at Active Directory, you basically have the forest and then domains inside that forest. So like if you were doing IT for two different organizations, they could be in the same forest, and then therefore the employees from one company would go to company B, they would be able to log in. So that would be a purpose you want to do. So in our case, we're going to go with new forest, and here we're going to go with the local as an example. We're going to hit next. And just want to point out that your mileage may vary on how fast this takes, again, depending on your machine you're running. As an example, this is running an i12 with 32 gigs of RAM with an M2 hard drive. So this is going to install pretty quick versus maybe someone installing this on a laptop that has a spinning drive, so on. So here's a couple quick notes. So here, when you go down these drop-down menus, you can, if you're going to support legacy servers, then you want to be able to. So if we start with 2016, even though this is 2019, I can still install 2016 servers, but I cannot use a 2012 R2 server. So again, if you're going to support older servers than what you started with, you do want to make sure you change the functioning level and the forest level to correspond to the lowest server you're going to join to your domain. All right. So again, this is going to create the DNS records and all that stuff for us. We're going to set in our, master password. So again, you want to set this password so you know what it is. If you're planning to, deploy this, you definitely want to make a note of that. If you're just doing it like I'm doing it just to gain the experience, then you don't necessarily have to worry about it because you just start over. And then here it's going to say, hey, we don't have the DNS server. So yeah, we're going to hit next and it's going to go ahead and do all that. Here, it's going to come up with the NetBIOS name. We'll give it a moment. It should populate in there because you can see that the wizard is still catching up. And that's typically going to be, your short name for legacy devices. So by default, it's going to come up with a name. You can change the name. So if you didn't want to have Lou, you could change it to be Lou underscore, AD or something. It doesn't matter. So I could do like underscore AD, or I could just make it something totally else if I wanted to. It doesn't matter. Again, it's for your your knowledge there, because these are things like these names. You can't just change these willy nilly. Like oh, tomorrow I'm going to call it Bob. Can't do that. You probably can, but it's not going to be an easy process. And I've never gone through a process of changing something. It's just easier to start over. But if you're in a large environment, then maybe that's not. But there we go. It's going to show us where we're going to install our logs. There's our default location, so we can just leave that. That's fine. Here's all the things it's going to do. So here it's going to create the global catalog. So that's the key note, is the first server gets the global catalog. So we're going to it's going to configure DNS for us. And now we're going to let it work. And then it's going to chug along for a little bit. And then once it's done validating, we'll hit install, and then we'll reboot, and then we'll be good to go. All right. And here we go. So now it's going to start installing. And then once it's finished, we'll reboot the machine, and then we'll be good to go. So here's just telling us a warning message saying that we're using lower encryption, which is fine. We can go back in there and change these things later. All right. So we're going to go ahead and restart the machine. All right, now that we're successfully logged in, we're going to go ahead and log in with our credentials. All right, now that we're successfully logged in, now we can check on our devices and see if everything's working. So if everything's working correctly, we should see, some of the following things. So let's go ahead and make this bigger. So if we go under administrative tools, we should see our admin tools. So like an example, here's our DNS. Let's go ahead and check it out. On our forward lookup, there's our lu.local. So here's all our Active Directory DNS records. So that is a good sign that we have, stuff populated in here. And then from here, we can go into administrative Active Directory uses and computers. All right. So this is the default containers or buckets, but these are called OUs, organization units. So by default, we have computers. So right now we don't see the server that we built. They're under domain controllers because it's a domain controller, so it's not a computer, so it's treated differently. And our default user account. So here's where we would create our users, and we can create additional OU containers and stuff like that. This is just a quick little walkthrough just to show you, hey, yes, we got our Active Directory going. So cool. So now there'll be a couple more part videos to this so you can see the rest of the journey. So thank you for following along with me, and I will catch you in the next video. All right, catch you later. Bye.